Correct.
Wow, that is pretty good. Thank you.
Councillor Columbus. Microphone, please. Sorry, thank you.
Oh, there it goes.
You got her.
The Dover Medical Center, is that in the institutional number here of 14%? Is that included in there?
That is included, and that would be 2017,
Okay.
those figures, right?
And what about the Port Dover Wharf, that condo complex?
Those would be included also in the 2017 that we've reported. So those are permit issued, ready to go. So at that point, it's really they're in control when they start.
Good, thanks.
Okay.
Continue.
Next slide. Just quick, I just have this one and one other, and any questions? This is, again, something, a positive we wanted to report on. Mr. Hoskin presented this in a press release, and this relates to Norfolk County's household income growth. And this comes from Stats Canada, where it talked about the median total income for Norfolk County households in 2015 was 67,000 plus or minus, and that was up 6.5% from 2005. So between 2005 and 2015, Norfolk County experienced the highest rate of growth in median household income in southwestern Ontario. We've provided some examples here. These are some pretty big competitors. Hamilton, Ingersoll, Woodstock, we know what's going on there. Brantford, Guelph, Kitchener, and Sarnia and Stratford, those are great comparators to have. So that's a positive that I think we need to know about. My last slide here, and then we'll continue over back with Mr. Johnson. Just to reiterate the importance of agriculture. It's one of our 3 or 4 prime drivers: agriculture, manufacturing, tourism. And again, we reported lately, this is through Statistics Canada, that Norfolk County is the leading farming region in Canada. Many perspectives, including technology use, fruit and vegetable production, and employment. Got over 196,000 acres in production and crop, and we have over 1,300 farms in operation and 1,860 farm operators. The farm market capital and the gross receipts are pretty significant as well. Also, from an employment perspective, we've all heard the importance of our seasonal and temporary workers. We're #1 in Canada with that. We know how important that is. I think our latest ag tour, we did hear loud and clear from those operators that they rely heavily on that. We're also #1 in Canada for the total number of employees that are employed in farming and agriculture. I can provide the further detail. I didn't want to bog us down in some numbers, but I'd be pleased to pass that on to you. That's all I've got, Mr. Mayor, and I'm glad to answer any other questions here.
Councillor Wells, thank you very much. Chris?
No, what that means, Councillor Wells, is through using technology, our fruit and vegetable production and employment, we are the top in Canada. Obviously, if you go out and you're talking specific crops, we know certainly the prairies are big on wheat and soybean and so on, but yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Councillor Sonnenberg?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not a question, just a comment. If you look at the average age of a farmer, it's 55.7 years. Most other professions have already retired many years by that age, and farmers just keep on going. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chris, my question relates to your comment previously about the development charges and our new report coming. Could you just refresh my memory, if no one else's, as to our formula for determining a development charge for residential, if you've got it handy?
Absolutely, through the mayor. So at a very high level, development charges, we rely on the 10-year capital plan. So as part of the capital budget, generally public works and community services are leading drivers. They've got all those big projects, lots of dollars. We look at the 10-year capital plan, we look at anything that's covered under general government, any library work, which of course has been completed in Delhi. Fire protection, so this is new growth. The more homes you have, at some point you trigger the need for perhaps more fire apparatus or another bay or an expanded facility. Your recreation needs, parking, ambulance services, even marinas, but it's primarily roads and those related services. And in town, serviced areas, water, wastewater, that's a big, big part of it. So all of these, going through, our consultant will go through the capital budget and work with all the staff and Mr. Johnson, and they'll come up with a figure that's fully justifiable under residential. So as an example, for a single-family home, and this would be for January 1st, 2018, in addition to the building permit that applicant would come forward with, they would be putting, they would have to pay an additional $14,052 per lot. And we use that goes into our reserve. Again, $14,052, that's for a single. To compare that to Brantford's probably 3 times that, and Toronto's over 100,000. Obviously, they've got transit infrastructure, bigger the community, the more the demand. But these provide defendable, justified reasons to get new development to pay for that. It's not fair for existing residents and businesses to pay for all these additional requirements. Water, wastewater, I'd mentioned. So that's for the residential piece. When it comes to what we call non-residential, so primarily commercial, they're rated on a per square meter cost.
Thank you for that, Chris. So my fundamental question was just on the residential one, since that's the lion's share. So is it a flat fee of $14,052 regardless of the estimated value of the home, or is it based on square footage?
No, that's a great question. So the building permit is based on construction value, and we know there's room to grow there, but we certainly cover our costs, and that's what the legislation requires. But for development charges, that is per unit. So $14,052 for a single-family home. There is a lesser fee for apartments. As an example, a 2-bedroom apartment would be at $6,119, and that would be in a home. As an example, I know some of our councillors here represent rural areas, so perhaps Mr. Geisens, a home being built in Langton would be off water and sewer. Their development charge rate, just for comparison, is $4,880. So obviously, over $9,000 per lot for water, wastewater. We know that infrastructure is expensive, but this provides a way for the municipality to build up necessary reserves to pay for the infrastructure that's needed.
Thank you, Councillor Broughton.
Thank you, Mayor Lou. Thanks for the report, Chris. I like the stats. Couple of questions. One is, there's a large percentage of our population in Norfolk that's over 50? 58% or something, or over 50?
Yeah, I don't have that figure with me here, but I can certainly verify it, but that sounds absolutely right.
So, and like a lot of these are retirees moving in, I understand. And like, do you have any idea? It'd be interesting to know how many of them vacate the county come winter. They head south, right? I know it seems to me there's an awful lot of people that do that have moved in here.
I have to agree. I mean, we know Port Dover is a real draw. It's being promoted as such as a retirement community. We know that there's a greater percentage of retirees that do travel.
You don't
could
have
be out
that.
west, out east, whatever. That's not something we particularly track. We could look at Stats Canada. But the fortunate thing is they continue to pay taxes year-round. So, that's
Okay.
a positive there.
And the other thing on the farming stats, there number of farm operators, but the number of farms. It's quite a difference in the figures. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure.
Basically, my interpretation of that is you will have, it's no longer just the mom and pop, the farmer, singular. It is a business, so there could be a number of operators, a business where there's a corporation or multiple owners that are working towards that. We know some of the large farm amalgamations and so on that are multi-generational or multi-partner, and they're all listed through the Statistics Canada as an operator of that farm.
Okay, and total land under crops, is that the total acreage that would be farmland, or no?
That is the total acreage that is in crop, so that would not include fallow or perhaps unused land. That's what is
Alice
being
or
grown.
what? Okay. Reason I say that, so municipal affairs shouldn't get too upset if we need a few more acres for Titan and Scott's, should they?
I know, that's a good question.
Yeah.
We know those policies are there. It's not just about growing crops for our
Yeah.
residents and for us. It's for the rest of the country and beyond.
Jobs.
Yeah, they're not making any new farmland.
No.
So I think it's important at least to have regard for that, and that's what our policies are about.
Thank you.
Anything further, Chris? Sorry.
No, I'm here for the day. Glad to answer any questions. I will pass on some of that information because it's good stuff, especially
Okay.
related to farming.
Appreciate you bringing that information.
My pleasure.
It makes the future look bright. Mr. Johnson, can I come back to you if you're ready?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes,
Thank you.
I will take over, but I want to go to the podium
Please.
because there seems to be pretty good luck at that podium, so I'm going to,
And you're going to need it. We're going to need it.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so I think this is going well so far. For the next few slides, I want to explain some like high-level overview of the budget process that Norfolk County does, some changes that we'd like to do for the 2018 budget process, and then some long-term changes we'd like to start in 2019. I'd also like to talk about some of the pressures that Norfolk County is having from the province as well as some other areas. And then I want to go into some statistics, and then we will sit down and look at some new budget initiatives and some drivers in detail. So this slide we have just an overview of the budgets that we do throughout the year. These are 2017 numbers there. However, we have passed the capital budget a few weeks ago, and so that number obviously has changed. However, if you look at the 2017 amounts, we, from an expenditure basis, Norfolk County as a corporation, we spend close to $208 million every year. So those are the four budgets. We have the capital. We're going to be looking at the rate-supported budget next week. And then at the end of January, we will be looking at the levy-supported operating budget for both the Board of Health and for Norfolk County. So this slide is busy, and it's busy on purpose. I'd like to display how long the process is to get all these budget numbers together for you. You can see the dark green area, the overview and economic outlook. We're about 2/3 of the way through our process. You can see it starts in June and it goes all the way to the end of January. And it's everything from budgeting and going through our salaries and benefits to looking at our user fees. We scrub our accounts, looking at our forecasted actuals, and I would say there's about 100 staff members involved in this budget process. Obviously, the SLT members are involved, as well as the 30-odd CLT members. And so of that 100, I think it's about 95 from the departments and divisions and about 5 finance staff that put it all together. So it's a very long, detailed process, and at the end of the day, we provide a very nice package to council to go through it through the budget deliberations. So 2018, it's my first budget. It's the first budget of most of these guys behind me, and first budget for Mr. David Cribbs. And the 2017 budget process, there was a resolution by Councillor Black, seconded by Councillor Oliver, that we needed some change to that process. And so these are some items that we are proposing or that we will be doing for 2018. Starting with, we would like to have on the screen your real-time residential average assessment levy impact. I was here last year for the budget deliberations, and there was a lot of times where we weren't sure where we were at. And so one of the things we'd like to do is, as we make the decisions, here is the impact. I'd like to walk through the new budget initiatives at the start. of the budget process, and hopefully, because those are the new things, those are the difference in services, those are the decisions need to be made by council, and those are the recommendations made by SLT2 council. So we need a good walkthrough of those initiatives. And also we need a walkthrough of the council-approved initiatives from 2017 and prior. There's decisions made by council dating back 4 or 5 years that are going to impact the 2018 budget. We would like to have the general managers participate. They did participate last year, however, a little bit more participation as far as a presentation of the budget drivers that they have going into 2018, and to provide information and reasons for the fluctuations in the budget. And then when we get to the regular operations, have a high-level overview of the changes in those operations. There's approximately 20,000 accounts that we pulled together, and as much as I'd love to go through as an accountant, I'd love to go through line by line every single one of them, we would need several weeks to do that. So we would like to provide council very high level of the regular operations. However, we would definitely highlight the significant changes. And that's the next bullet. Also, we would provide lists of cuts by SLT before council would look at the budget, because we do go through a filter process, if you will, before council sees the numbers. And ongoing review of the process and continually improve. This is this overview and economic outlook is the first time that Norfolk has done this, and at the end of the day, I'd like to know if we should continue or not, and that's where feedback is I'm a firm believer in feedback, so any feedback from council will be greatly appreciated. For 2019, that's a little ways away. We are going to try to concentrate on variance reporting. We already do with health. Marlene's behind me. We provide, through the health audit, we provide variance reporting to council, and we plan on expanding that to the corporation as a whole. That is a large undertaking in the finance department to provide that information. As I said, we're trying to pull together 20,000 accounts, 20,000 lines of forecasts to the end of the year in order to give you that variance.
That sounds great. Will we be adding any new staff in order to accomplish your goals?
If Councillor Wells would like to move a motion to do that, I would like
The only
that very
motion
much.
I put forward is to reduce staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. James, just on that point of variance reporting, I know you've heard in your predecessor over the last 2 or 3 years that council is anxious to get periodic budget updates and statuses as the year progresses, and we've been patient waiting for the new financial system to be implemented, which it has been over the last 2 years, and we think it's functional now. Are you in a position then to give us a quarterly budget update as we go through? You say we're doing it for health. We understand we are. We were required by the ministry to start doing that, even though it's something that I think we've all hoped that our new financial system would allow to have happen periodically anyway. So can we assume as council that we will start to see or hear, or both, quarterly updates on our budgets that are running below target or above target or on target as the year progresses?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that is definitely something that the finance department will be providing to council. The question, though, is when and how often, and that's something that we have to determine. To do a quarterly variance report in March may be too early because we passed the budget at the end of January. Right. However, June is definitely a month that we would do a variance report for, and we are working towards that. The finance department, we are undertaking a number of different projects right now, and you'll see some of them in this slide. One of them being providing financial statements in-house. Right now, our auditor does our financial statements for us. And a corporation this size, we should be doing that in-house. And I can't tell you the amount of advantages we have for keeping that information, that knowledge, that experience in-house rather than having someone outside pulling all those numbers together for the financial statements.
And thank you for that. And I don't mean to oversimplify it, but I'm just going to go back for a moment to my days with LPRCA. And at that time, even the simplified financial system that we had there, almost at the push of a button, the financial controller could give a status report on any given category of the budget. And I'm hoping that's what our system is going to allow to have happen. Even if you just give us a very high-level overview that we'll see a piece of paper in our hands, say in June, that will say within the Public Works and Environmental Services Department, you got 4 or 5 categories, some are above, some are below, and some are on target. Is that the kind of periodic reporting you are committing to do for us, given this new financial system?
So through you, Mr. Chair, we could do that today if you get down into the weeds. I can tell you right now.
Well, I'm not suggesting in the weeds, but I think it is important for council, more than once a year when we get our financial statements, to know how budgets are unfolding. That's all I'm asking.
And I 100% agree with what you're saying. I just wanted to explain that our system is capable of giving variance reporting at a certain level. However, to pull it all together as a corporation, that is what takes time. There are a number of, unfortunately, manual entries that we make. Anything that has a reserve funding to it, anything that requires journal entries in order to make the certain areas of our books make sense, that takes time. And we need to get into a regular monthly or quarterly month-end close, if you will. Norfolk County doesn't have a month-end close today, and we need to get there. And that's part of my vision going into 2019 is to get there. And one of them, it's one of the bullets on this slide, is I want to reorganize the finance department on don't read into that too much, but I want to reorganize the duties in order to be able to do regular reconciliations and things of that nature on a timely basis in order to do year end before July or August. And we need to do those steps, I believe, first before we can get into regular quarterly variance reporting. So I 100% agree with what you are saying, but we need to take the steps in order to get there. Performance measures, that is something that I would like to, I guess the key term is reintroduce to council, because I understand that it is something that has been done in the past, and that is something that I would like to do either with the Standard & Poor's report or at the year-end financial statement report. Either way, I believe that we should be providing financial performance measures to council. The bullet, the finance reorganization, I already alluded to that with Councillor Oliver. That is something I'm looking forward to doing, to bring financial statements in-house and to provide regular reconciliations into key areas is important in my mind. And I don't want to suggest that we are not doing, when I say regular reconciliations, I mean that on a more regular basis, monthly, quarterly. Right now, we have different scales of what we do reconciliations for. I don't want to get into a lot of details here, but there are reconciliations we do on a monthly basis that are imperative, and then we do other ones on a longer scale, but I want to bring that tighter in order to provide more information to council and also do more timely reporting, and it's all part and parcel. And financial statements prepared internally, I mentioned that already. Ongoing research into financial systems functionality. Councillor Oliver mentioned we have a new financial system and we are 2 years into it. There is still a lot of areas within that financial system that we haven't had time to research into making our financial information more efficient. So there's a lot of untapped resources, I guess you can say, that we can investigate with that system. Asset management. That is something that, yes, Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, if I might ask a question. We've all been listening to the news for quite some time, and we know that in the health department, we had a problem with SAMS. Now we understand that in the federal government, we have problems with the accounting system there. I'm a little concerned when we suggest that we may be looking at our changing the financial system, which seems to be working relatively well now, to something different. We're not going to run into any of these problems that take years and millions and maybe billions of dollars to correct, are we?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells, we did go with a new financial system in 2015, and sorry, what I meant by that bullet was there are some areas within that financial system that we just haven't explored yet into providing better information for council. One example is the timesheets. We have electronic timesheets. We didn't have that before, and there are capabilities within those timesheets to record time in certain areas, so we would be able to have better information in case there's a gas leak. We'd be able to give you more timely information on the costs for that, whereas the methodology we used to give you that information this year was a bit more of a manual process.
Thank you. Councillor Geisens, please. It's a little frightening.
So the bullet there about asset management, there's legislation that will be coming down the pipe for municipalities to concentrate more on asset management plans and to make sure that they tie into your 10-year capital forecast. So that is something that we'll be looking into. And of course, continual monitoring of the reserves, debt instruments, and funding sources. That is part of the report in July 11th of this year. We expressed certain steps that we're going to be taking for the reserves. We're right in the middle of the development charge study right now as part of the steps, and then in the new year, perhaps in the fall, we're going to be looking at our reserve funding policy. So this slide is, we wanted to communicate to council the pressures that we're having both from the province and as well as other budget pressures. Councillor Wells, if I can put you on the spot, there has been numerous times at council where you have mentioned provincial downloading and the pressures that we have as a municipality. So I just have a few of them on this slide. I'm sure there's some that I'm missing, but I just wanted to put it on a slide for you to see. So this year you'll see the funding has been reduced by about $332,000. So that is a budget driver that we'll be seeing later on today. Well, that's Norfolk County's share that is going down. I will defer that to Kathy to answer on what kind of projects we fund with that.
It's the Ontario Municipal Funding, Partnership Funding. It is the funding that we receive for some of the downloading services that the province had originally implemented. We're actually receiving a reduction in the funding because right now, actually this is the last year where social services, the province is actually providing 100% funding for client payouts. So this is a reflection of us not having to subsidize the client payouts. The province is now is fully funding the payouts, and you'll see when we go through the drivers that on the other side we do have that a partial reduction. It doesn't equal dollar for dollar, but there is a reduction within the social services division that offsets the additional funding. I guess the better word is uploading. They're uploading the funding to us, yes. So there'll be a small portion.
They're just such nice people.
Thank you, Kathy. Bill 68, Modernizing Ontario's Municipal Legislation Act. You'll see again in the budget drivers later on, there's a dollar impact for that. Bill 148, the Fair Workplace, Better Jobs Act. Mr. Slichenkov has some really good slides to explain the dollar impact on that one. Bill 177, Stronger Fair Ontario Act, in regards to budget measures. Again, that's the asset management plan. That is something that we will be looking into. We don't have a figure for that today because it's still early in the game, but it is a pressure from the province. Reserve levels, the infrastructure deficit. This is basically the amount of money we have in reserves that we contribute to them every year does not match the amount of money that that our assets are depreciating. So that's an infrastructure deficit or infrastructure gapping, if you will. And that is a pressure that we have to try to increase the reserves in order to replace our assets when they do reach their full life. We have been receiving increased number of audits over the last few years. The WSIB workplace audit, I believe, took 4 or 5 days of workplace inspections this year. The famous health audit that we've been talking about for quite a while took extremely large amount of time. There's a WDO audit coming up, and we've also had some social housing audits as well. So these are all provincially mandated audits, we can't put a dollar figure on that. However, it does take up a lot of resources. There are increases in inspections for water, wastewater, as well as Norview Lodge has been experiencing increased amount of inspections as well. And for lack of better terms, they're being picky. I'm not sure, perhaps Lee or Marlene can expand on those if council desires. However, that is that is what has been happening. Bill 41, the Patients First Act, and also the public health funding formula, there's been some changes there, and we've been getting some pressures from the province related to that. Standard & Poor's, they have stated that our rating is at risk if we do not adjust our reserve contributions or our debt level. And one of the comments that they made in the paper, and this is an interesting way that they word it, but basically I'll read it out to you. We could take a positive rating action if revenue flexibility improves from the limited ability and willingness to adjust modifiable revenues. So that basically says if we are reluctant in raising taxes, that could affect our rating. And David, I don't know if you wanted to expand on that.
What I can say is this language came through in a conference call and then was put in the formal document. And I was in a room with a bunch of accountants and MBAs, and I wasn't entirely lost, but I was, I was in the deep end and they were all in the shallow with their feet firmly on the ground until this happened. And you look at those bottom words. We could take a positive rating action, i.e. You can borrow more cheaply, right? If revenue flexibility, that means taxes, improves from the limited ability and willingness to adjust modifiable revenues, that means taxes too. So what they're saying is, this is Standard & Poor's in New York City, not us, but Standard & Poor's saying we could do better if we had more revenue. They're actually recommending you raise taxes. That's what that says in plain English, to be clear. So,
I definitely will, Mr. Mayor.
It is what it is. We're in a position. Because we're in a position.
So, the next slide is very interesting. So this is 2016 data. It's from the BMA study, and they specialize in municipal comparators. And this particular slide has it has 25 municipalities with the population range of 30,000 to 99,000. You can see if you look at them, they're all over Ontario. Has North Bay, Timmins, Brant County, Norfolk, Haldimand. And they, basically that's the typical taxes for a detached bungalow. And you can see Norfolk County has done very well in keeping its taxes low. And it's very apparent on that slide that of our municipal comparators, we have the lowest tax rate.
Black?
Just, I know when you separate this out, but if you were to add water and sewer to this, I think that chart would look a lot different.
So I'm glad you asked that, Councillor Black. I did look at the water amounts, and so Norfolk County, the water and sewers as a percentage of household income is 4.8%, and the provincial average is 4.5%. So we are over the provincial average. It's how Norfolk County is. We have a lot of pipe and not a lot of users, and that's the hand that you're dealt. So you are correct. Our water and sewer rates are higher than the provincial average. And then,
Say that again, it's Norfolk County's 4.5% what?
so Norfolk County, as a percentage of your household income, and
Okay.
this is from the BMA study,
Yeah.
we're at 4.8%, but the Ontario average is 4.5%.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Columbus?
Mr. Mayor, the question, is water and sewer in any of these bar graph, in the bar graph?
Through
'Cause
you,
they
Mr.
used to be at one time. I know.
Through Mr. Mayor, no, specifically this presentation is for the tax levy, so I did not want to put in the rates in
Thank
there.
you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Councillor Oliver?
Mr. Mayor, just a quick one. James, you just referenced the BMA study. What's the last one of those? 2016 is the last year we have it for it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's
and
correct.
I know I bring this up every year. I presume, do we still get at least one paper copy, 2 paper copies of it?
It's done every 2 years.
Yep.
So 2018 is, we've budgeted, we included that in
Yes.
our proposal. We have electronic, and we can certainly provide a paper copy for your perusal. It's easier, I think, to flip through the paper
It
sometimes
is
on
much
documents
easier.
like that.
I'm not asking for one for everyone, nor even for my own personal, but it would be helpful if you could maybe give us one paper copy that we could,
I'll
you
make
know,
that available
pass
through the
around.
clerk, and then it's available for your review at your convenience.
thank you very much.
Okay.
Councillor Wells?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I must say that this has been a very useful form that we have had here before us this morning, and I certainly have enjoyed it. I just wish our PR department would work a little harder, including our councillors, when I look at this report, which says that Norfolk County has the lowest taxes in our comparative group, which I think is wonderful news, except that news is not spread to many of the residents of Norfolk County because they don't feel that they are being undertaxed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And a comment I have, Councillor Sonnenberg, I'll get right to you, is when we look at the average, the far right-hand side, which is about $3,300 on a particular bungalow, we'll say, a single-family dwelling, compared to Norfolk on the left side, is about $2,200. So it says to me that we are about 1/3 less than what the average is in the comparators. So this is a good thing to carry around in my briefcase when people say our taxes are terrible, terrible. However, it would be interesting, if I may, that Chris Baird has reported to us earlier that our median income per household is about $67,000. I don't know what the median household or the ability to pay is. Plus, I don't know how we compare with the services. Much of our area is rural with, let's say, the services provided in Niagara Falls, some of these comparators. So there's more than just simply taking one piece of the pie out and comparing. It's and again, I think we're in pretty good shape tax-wise, but there's more to compare than just simply isolating where we are. I had another speaker here, Sonnenberg, yes, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, you suggested you're going to take this graph here in your briefcase and have it available. I'm going to take this to a graphic artist this afternoon and have it applied to the side of my pickup truck. On both sides, so I can drive around with this information to show people. Thank you.
Boy, keep going, James. You're getting us stirred up here.
I'm just glad I didn't put that graph together. So this slide here is a history of taxes for Norfolk County. The second column is our net tax levy, so that's the expenses less any revenues generated, not including the tax levy, obviously, so we're talking about user fees and other items. And the next column to that is the difference year over year. And the percentage beside that is the overall percentage of your levy change. And then you have the average RT, or residential tax percent. What we do as a stat that is very common amongst municipalities is to find out what does that tax increase mean to your average resident. And that's what that column represents. And you can see for the last 6 years it's been below 2.5%.
Mr. Mayor, so that one includes the education, right?
Correct. Thank you, Councillor Black. There are some years where the education rate dipped. We're not expecting that for this year. We haven't had any notice that there will be a continued decline in the residential tax rate, or the municipal education tax rate, sorry. Those figures there includes the education change as well.
And James, if I may, the second column to the right, from the right, really is the net effect on the residential portion. In other words, the budget might be up last year from 16 at 3.6, but when you factor in the growth and a few other things, the bottom line is, for the last 3-4 years, we've averaged about a 2% increase on an average net to the residential homeowner, correct?
That is correct,
That's
Mr.
the
Mayor.
bottom line. Thank you. Councillor Columbus, please.
Yes, James, so what percentage of the average household's taxes goes towards education?
I would have to confirm that with Kathy. I'm thinking 20%. I got a slide coming up later with what the dollar amount is, and maybe that'll answer your question.
Okay, thanks.
I just don't know what the percentage is offhand.
Councillor Brunton?
I think one of the things, and I mentioned earlier, there's, 58% of our population is over the age of, there's a large percentage of retired people in our community, and I think maybe that tax that we talk about all the time, and I get it from people all the time, but they're on fixed incomes, they're on pensions, and that's the fact. That's why they get concerned every time there's a raise. It's not, it's different. Like, I'm sure Pickering, for example, it's at the high end of the scale. Those people on there, probably, I'd like to know what their average income is. You know, it's probably phenomenal compared to people that are on pensions around here. So you got to put it all the angles and look at it. So, thank you.
I'm sorry. Continue, James. Sorry.
So the last column there is growth, and you can see that we went from 0.7% up to 1.33% in 2013. The growth that we're expecting for the 2018 budget, I would say it's around 1 to maybe 1.2%. All of the construction activity that Mr. Baird has been talking about, MPAC takes a little bit of time for us to get that assessment to us. So hopefully over the next 2 or 3 years, we can experience some really good growth in Norfolk County. For purposes of today, we used, you'll see some slides later on, we used 1% just as a growth factor. So now we were getting into the numbers, and I'm going to go and sit back at my chair and let Kathy LaPlante take over. The next few slides, get comfortable. There will be, I anticipate a lot of discussion on some of these numbers, and SLT general managers are behind me, figuratively and and really they are. And they are here to answer any of your questions, and hopefully this will be a good discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James. The next three slides that you'll be reviewing, council has seen on a number of occasions. You've seen them probably for the last 10 years at every levy-supported operating budget presentation. So these are the numbers you really like to see and that it's going to be the most fun to look at out of everything today. So hopefully you enjoy them. But just so that you know, these are definitely projections. They, as mentioned earlier, these numbers will change, and they will change before they probably even are further reviewed by SLT and by the time you receive them in January. So they are the major budget drivers, and they're projected for 2018. So on the first slide, the approved net, 2017 net levy requirement is $79.6 million. The first item that I've listed on this table is the impact of Council 2016 phase-in decisions. You may recall back in 2016, the levy budget incurred a number of very substantial levy increases in three different areas. And the one area was the waste management costs based on Tom Howe closing down and the new contract that we have for transferring waste. And the other substantial increase in 2016 was the cost of fire protection services. That was a result of the rate study budget where council approved that the rate budget would no longer subsidize the fire protection services and it was moved to the tax levy. And the third phase-in was for leachate costs. Leachate costs were exponentially increasing. So what council decided at that time was to subsidize basically or reduce, phase in the cost for these substantial amounts, and we were funding from the reserves a portion of these items, of the increased costs. That started in 2016, and then in 2017, council also approved a further phase-ins, and the approval was to phase it in these amounts rather than 3 years over a period of 4 years. The net impact on that is $708,000 or 0.9% increase over last year's levy.
Well, Kathy, I don't think any of us remember these decisions, so perhaps we can just take it out if we don't recall.
We can do that.
Actually, I do remember those discussions. Thank you.
The next area is what I've identified as uncontrollable adjustments. These are items that I don't believe that council or staff have very little wiggle room, if any room at all, to move on these. The first item is the increase in projected debt payments, $748,000. Again, this is a decision that we've made over the last few years when we were developing the budgets to include, depending on the timing of our issue. We've only, in 2017, there was only the first payment of the debenture issue included. The majority of the impact in the debt payments for 2018 includes the second payment. That amounts to about $660,000 of that $748,000. The next item is, James has already mentioned, that's an increase in the funding, $332,000. We just received the letter from the province, so that is a pretty hard number. That won't be changing.
Yeah, so, you know, on some of these, like, can you indicate an offset? Because on that, you know, just to say, okay, we got an increase because of reduction in the of 332.1, but there's an offset on that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's, you know, I look at that, I think, oh my goodness, but if you throw in the offset, it doesn't look so bad.
You're correct, Councillor Wells. If you go down a couple
Black.
more, correct?
Do I look like Wells?
You got the same gray hair.
He's better looking.
If you, a couple items down, you'll see social services including 100% funding upload of there's a credit of 91,900, okay?
It's the red one.
That's the red one, yes. That includes the uploading to 100% funding for the social services client payouts. That is the net amount of all of social services. So the actual amount that's offsetting the $332,000 for the UMF is $224,000.
Still short.
We're still short. But the AMP funding, with the AMP reduction, that is, I believe, the majority of the reason why there is a reduction in our AMP funding. There are other factors that we'd have to compare from year over year.
The question I have back to the first one, the increase of 750,000 roughly in the long-term debt payments, could you give me an example of why, or the rationale, maybe you can't,
Sure.
what has caused that, James? Thank you. Just curious.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's a very good question. So that's all related to funding capital.
Funding capital?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's three, council or Norfolk County has three options when it comes to capital projects and trying to afford it. We could either contribute to our reserves and pay for them proactively.
Yes.
We can cut the projects. Ms. Robinson doesn't like that, so we don't do it. However, and then the third option is what you're left with, is we need debt.
Debentures.
Yes.
Got it.
And so this is as a result of the decisions made with those three options.
Okay, I understand now.
Yes. And then later on, you'll see reserve contributions. If you'll remember to the July 11th meeting where the council made a very good decision to increase reserve contributions. With that decision, these kinds of surprises will be made.
You're telling me, in a nutshell, we don't have enough in our reserves to fund our capital projects.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you are correct.
Thank you. Kathy, sorry, I just want to be clear on that. Thank you.
The one item that is affecting, that we believe will impact the 2018 budget is our investment income, and we're anticipating approximately $120,000 reduction, and that's mainly based on our cash balances and lower bank rates. The next item is a decrease of $91,800. The wording may be a little confusing here, I apologize for that, but it is a net increase in providing public health services. At this point in time, generally they don't receive any time of funding information until September or October, but there's not anticipated that we would have any major increases in funding for providing services for public health at this time.
Yes, Councillor Oliver, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kathy, I was a bit confused by that one when I first read it. So you're saying it's showing as an additional cost because there is no additional base funding.
That's correct.
And yet we're continuing to have to provide that base service.
That's correct.
All right, gotcha. Thank you.
We already talked about the social services, that is a net amount, a net savings of $91,900, and that's basically due to the upload, which Norfolk County will be receiving a savings of $224,000 for the uploading to 100% client payouts, and the balance includes costs related to childcare and Ontario Works or Social Services Administration that receives 50% funding. The next item is an estimate. It's based on projected inflationary increases on all our material supplies and services. It's $564,000 that we're projecting. It works out to about 1.8%, which is generally close to CPI. The next three items relate to salaries and benefits. We've already talked a little bit about the legislation related to minimum wages and equal pay. There'll be a further presentation on those two items later today. That actually is approximately $200,000, just the impact for those two items.
Mr. Wells?
Thank you, Mayor. Under minimum wage, do we have employees in Norfolk County that work for minimum wage? And if so, where would those employees be employed?
Under minimum wage. Do we get an increase?
The question is, would employees employed by the county work for $11.60 an hour, whatever it is? Can anybody answer that on staff?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we could answer that now and get into some details. However, we do have a very good presentation coming up later on by Mr. Slichenkov.
And while I have the floor, with your permission, Mr. Mayor, I am confused at the last one, increase in salaries and benefits. When we sit around in the back room, usually we look at, let's say, 2%. And I think that's what we have given. How does 2% come to 4.2%? Surely the other 2.2 can't be for benefits.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells. So actually, I'm glad you said that because I wanted to explain the conclusion of this slide a little
Great.
bit. So the 4.2% is everything. It's the 3.4 million plus the 700,000 added together, and that's your change in levy at this point in the slide deck. These are the council-approved initiatives from the past, plus what we consider uncontrollable adjustments, and we're going into 2018 without anything else at 4.2%. So that's the levy change. If we go back here, you'll see in 2016 we had a 4.6% levy change, which equated at that time into a 2.1% increase in a typical property. Now, I caution you in there that the education rates probably were down a little bit there in that year, and when we calculate that average RT percent for 2018, there are different factors. So I don't want to have a hard equation from 4.6 to 2.1. It could change year over year, but it gives you an idea on what your average residential impact would be at 4.6. So we're at 4.2, and now we're going to the next slide, and we have some other budget drivers here that Kathy will.
Just,
Oh,
go ahead, David.
so before we go on to this slide, the increase in salaries and benefits is 1.4 million, but that's just part of the overall total, which is 2%. Yes, sorry, Mr. Cripps.
All right, that was my question,
Sorry.
that the 1.4 million is probably roughly 2% of
That is
total
correct,
wages and
Mr. Mayor.
benefits.
Yes.
Yeah,
And that detail will be given in January once we get
That was your
all the
question.
numbers finalized.
thank you.
Oh, we've already talked about the 4.2, so if we go to the next slide, the next area that we have included are what we feel are council or departmental controllable items. The first item is the increase in the reserve contribution levels. These are increases that council has approved. It's related to the capital replacement reserves. If you recall, back in July, there was a number of recommendations that council approved to increase contributions to reserves and reserve funds, and one of the items was roads reserve, and I believe there was another Port Rowan Medical Center, or the Port Rowan Medical Center was the other one. So the impact on that is just over $1 million to increase the contributions to our capital replacement reserves. And that hopefully that was a plan we presented to council, that over the next 10 years we will no longer be in a deficit position. The next item is a good news note to make. This is a decrease in the recycling contracts of almost $667,000. That's based on a renewal contract, I believe.
Through the mayor to council, you will recall that when the